Our first presentation this evening is the Fire Department Strategic Assessment. Mr. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor and members of the council, we've asked our Fire Chief, Doug Short, to come this evening and share with the council some of the state of affairs in the department, some of the identified needs, and maybe some opportunities to address those that might be coming forward. So I will let Chief Short begin his presentation momentarily.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, council members, for giving me this opportunity. As city manager told you, to just kind of give you a state of what the fire department is in and maybe some potential needs and things that we need to be looking at here in the next several years for the fire department. You know, it's not uncommon for us to always say we have a need, but I do definitely want to step before you just to make sure. Yeah, it's not tall enough, I can tell you that. Lapel mic here.
There you go.
To just give you an idea of some of the things that we are dealing with here. So as you may or may not know, just to give you a little historical information here. Currently, the fire department is still 10 stations spread throughout the city. We have approximately 14 companies, not approximately, we have 14 companies that provide response out of those 10 stations. Of those companies, they're all staffed with firefighters, FEOs, and captains. We have 9 pumpers, 10 if you count one as a quint. We have 2 rescues and 2 trucks or aerial apparatus. The one truck that is also a pumper is a quint, which is an aerial apparatus. Personnel-wise, we have about 156 operational personnel in the field that are firefighters, captains, and FEOs. We have 3 shift commanders that work the shift, the 24, 48-hour shift, just like the firefighters. And then we have our administrative staff that's part of our organization. As you'll see, and you probably should have also in your packets, this is just the overview map of the City of Independence and the locations of all of our stations throughout the city. The map that you see and the locations of those stations have been in place since at least 1987 that I'm aware of. And the maps and station locations have been in their location since about 1993. Those were made in a geographical type of setting. Today, though, while we still have those districts for all those stations, we have turned over to what's called proximity, which means that now our trucks are actually dispatched by the unit being closest, so we utilize GPS. Some stations still serve in the correct place across the city. We lack some areas of the city that have some particular slow times and maybe are falling behind with the population itself. And I'll get into that here in just a little bit. So just to give you just some basic statistics, back in 2020, so last year, our call total was over 23,412 to be exact. That was about a 3.9% increase over 2019. That's not an unusual thing. Even with COVID, it has been very consistent that we're constantly going up every year. Just since 2009, we've seen over a 33% increase in the number total of incidents that we have. See a little bit of a breakdown here as well. About 21% service calls. Those are things like automatic alarms, hazardous materials incidents, things of that nature that are non-fire. We have our fire alarms, which account for about 4%. That's anything that has a fire involved in it. And then about 75% is actually somewhere close to 75% is actually EMS related, emergency medical services related. Of those 17,000 calls, we do have a large number of around 3,500 that are actually non-emergency, but because of the way we dispatch in the city, we're en route to them until a determination is made that it's non-emergency. So some of those are actually canceled en route when it comes to EMS. Just another little odd peculiarity here that you need to know is not only do we respond to 23,000 calls, but it actually equates to 30,000 actual apparatus runs. So in other words, not every call is one piece of apparatus. So like for an MVA, you're going to have a rescue and a pumper. For an automatic alarm, you have a rescue, a pumper, and a truck. For a structure fire, you'll have 4 pumpers, a rescue, and a truck, and a battalion chief. So each of those individual runs accounts for about 30,000. Again, that's an increase over 2019 of about 3.5%, and that's about a 40% increase in total apparatus runs since 2009. So, a rather large increase, and it's been steady over that time period. One of the things that also applies to that as a challenge is the response times. When we look at response times, we look at averages and 90th percentile. That's the standard for the fire service. The average, of course, is those 23,000 calls divided by the amount of time it took us to respond, from the time we received the dispatch till the time our first unit got on the scene. However, the fire service uses a 90th percentile, which is a pretty standard across the board in the fire service. In other words, that's the goal that we try to meet 90% of the calls that we respond to that are emergency. So in the 90th percentile, it takes a little bit more, and it's kind of hard to see that last, but you'll notice that our 90th percentile is in the 8 minutes and 37 seconds, and the 8 minutes and 12 seconds in 2020. That means that 90% of the time, we made it to every call within 8 minutes and 12 seconds. The goal, or the standard, is usually, or not usually, is 5 minutes and 20 seconds. So it's significantly high. Why? Because when you look at the 11 of the 14 companies we have, they're responding to over 2,000 calls a year. Of those 14, or of those 11, I have 3 that are over 3,000 calls per year. So what that equates to is that means your response times are going to be higher. It means that you're going to probably have a lot more crew fatigue, and as well as you're going to have a lot more vehicle maintenance and vehicle replacement costs. So get a little more detail into some of our issues and needs that we need to have. One of the first things that we need to start looking at is our station replacement. Back in 2004, when the first sales tax was actually paid for, or when the first sales tax was passed, we did have some money that was allocated in the first tax, a quarter cent or an eighth cent for the first 4 years, that was for stations. However, it only renovated the remaining 7 stations that we had. So when the tax was renewed, we did not have that additional money to replace stations. Thus, we're having a little bit more difficulty, or we're getting to a point now where that station replacement is going to be very important. I'm going to point out 2 that are very specific that probably have the highest need throughout the department. The first one is Station 8. Station 8 was built in 1964. It's located at Truman and Powell, right next to IPL. This station is the oldest station we have, of course. We have gotten rid of all of the stations of the similar size and build that we've had from the past, but we still maintain Station 8. Some problems with Station 8 is, one, when we did the renovation, it was putting lipstick on the pig. We couldn't expand. We couldn't make sure that the crew quarters met newer standards. We couldn't ensure that trucks could even fit into this station. This station was designed for trucks in 1964. They're not the same as they are today. So we have to even be very selective to the trucks, the apparatus that we put in the station, to make sure that they'll fit in the actual garage doors. That one's probably our highest need. Our next highest is probably our Station 5. Station 5 is about 35th in Vermont, 35th in Sterling, somewhere in that area. While it is a little bit newer of a station, it was built in 1986, I believe, 84. One thing about Station 5 is that it was built on park property. That park property, the Firehouse Park, it has a pond on it as well. The reason it has a pond is because that station sits on top of a spring. That whole area sits on top of a spring. One of the things that we deal with at Station 5, which is kind of difficult to see here, but not only was it probably not built quite big enough, but you can see from the actual wall there, this station has gone through many repairs on the flooring as well as the walls, with cracks up to a half inch to an inch in the walls. And that's all because of settling because of that spring. It's going to be pretty important that we get this station replaced because there's no telling how much longer. We noticed that the spring actually has been increasing in the amount of water. We've dealt with over the last year some issues with higher amounts of water coming from just upstream or just up the station that's flowing across the station property. So we know that that spring is definitely getting its use and starting to bring down or undermine into that station. Something else that we need to look at is we need to look at the possibility of future stations. As I said before, these stations were placed where they're at back in 1987 with that call load that it had, or even before then. But it was based on that call load we had back then. That call load is no longer applicable, or it has to be restudied and determined to get our apparatus closer to where our calls are today. We can do some really basic analysis and know from heat maps where a lot of our newer calls are at. We see some of our problem spots being mainly in the 291 and 39th Street area, that corridor being between Station 10, Station 7, and Station 2. If you look at that map, it's on the outside distance for all of them when it comes to that 80th percentile. It's difficult to reach a lot of those. We're seeing a lot of new commercial development. We're seeing the apartment and housing complexes go up in that area, as well as all of the medical types of homes and facilities that are going up in that area. So it definitely has an issue for us to look at. Another issue was we have 3 stations out there, Station 6, 10, and 9, which were built back in 1987, I believe. Yeah, 1986 and 1987, that these stations were residential wood frame type construction. The reason they build fire stations out of brick is because when you're moving 30 tons of truck in and out of a building every day, several times a day, it has a tendency to have a impact on the foundation and on the building itself. This type of wood frame construction, while would be very adequate for a small rural department that doesn't roll out that door every day, 5 or 6 times a day, it takes its toll on these. They also have no room for expansion, so we couldn't add facilities. We couldn't add bedrooms if we needed to. They are strictly one company, and it's even hard to put one company of 3 people in these stations. But they also have to have that, we also had to have that outlook in the future for them as well. Probably not immediate needs, but we're probably approaching that time period pretty quick. So as I said before, we got to look at our future station needs that we'll possibly look at, Station 11, whatever you want to call it, or based on what we look at in deployment. We're going to have to put something in that 39th and 291 corridor area to meet the need. If we look back at the last station we built, which was Station 3 and Station 4, this is the style of station that we had. These are a metal frame construction that these stations were built. They have drive-through garages. They've had, they can accommodate an additional company if necessary, but they're mainly built for one company. But it gives you room to expand and to be able to hold your excess reserve apparatus, things of that nature. So this is the type of station that we need to look at in the future, something very close to it. It has to be able to grow with us as we grow. Another facility issue that we have is back in 2004 when we passed the tax, one of the main things in that was to build a fire training facility. We did build a burn training facility. This is out on 78 Highway near Powell Road. The training facility, as it got built, ran into some financial problems, I guess, was a little bit higher than what they had anticipated. So the one thing that was taken away from that is we did not build a classroom facility with it. So it's a standalone building out there with no heat, no bathrooms, nothing out there. When we go out to do training, we do have porta potties and things like that out there, but it's, it doesn't provide some of the other side of the training facilities that we need to have. Now, this could potentially be looked at as a potential relocation site for another station, so it could be combined possibly with the station there. We set on approximately 10 acres there, and we're utilizing about 3 to 4 of them right now. The back 2 to 3 we won't be able to use because they are a landfill in nature, but the forward property is still available and open, would fit right in with a lot of the Blue River development that's going in out there, community college development. So what else do we have to look at? Well, we have to think about other things other than just stations as well. One of the things that's another high priority need is, of course, vehicle replacement. We currently have about 9 active pumpers, 3 aerials, 2 rescues, and about 18 chief officers' staff vehicles. The pumpers and the aerials are the biggest concern that I have here. When we started the tax back in 2004 and even renewed it in 2017, we were looking at pumpers that were costing us anywhere from $350,000 to about $425,000. We've now seen an increase of a pumper that is close to $550,000 a year, or for one truck. That increase is not because we're adding a lot of frilly bells and whistles. We're getting very stock, low, only things we need on those trucks. But the cost of the construction, the motors, things of that nature have just driven the price up, as you probably have seen in some of our recent purchases, where our aerials are now over $1 million when we're purchasing an aerial. Pumpers generally have a lifespan of about 10 years in a frontline situation. We're seeing that our pumpers are lasting about 5 to 7 years. Again, high call load causes that. When we're out there, our trucks are, while everybody can say, well, diesels can put 250,000 miles on them, not if they're only going 2 blocks at a time. It's very rough on a truck. So we see our pumpers having a need of about a 5 to 7 year replacement need for our busiest companies. And our aerials, which normally you could get 15 years out of, we're probably only getting about 10 years effectively before we reach a point that the maintenance is extremely high. Other things that need to be constantly looked at is equipment replacement.
Chief, can I interrupt you?
Sure.
Sure. Madam Mayor?
Go ahead.
Thank you. So when you say we're making those runs with that equipment, with the pumpers and stuff, it's mainly medical. So are we taking those pumper trucks to all EMS calls?
Yes.
So all of those are running up, virtually all the ones that we see are going up and down for a medical call, not putting out a fire, grass fire, structure
Well, the
fire.
thing is if the truck's on a medical call and a fire comes in, that next closest truck may be, miles away,
Sure.
greater than 8 to 9 minutes away. So that gives us the ability to have that and to be available as soon as we're in the apparatus.
So with the nature of the calls for service changing greatly, so would the need for a different apparatus to be dispatched to that?
That is gonna have to be looked at, yes. That is one of the things we have to look at in our future.
Are those conversations taking place with you and 781 and
Yes,
that
they are.
group on how that nature can
Yes, they
can
are.
change?
We've made some adjustments, trying to, make some adjustments in that, using what we have.
Sure.
So we're at a point now where we have to look at even something different at some
So-
point in the future.
So how about a complete, if we're going to take a look at that system, how about a complete overhaul look at maybe pick up the ambulance service?
Well, I wouldn't go that far,
Okay,
but because there's no money to be made in EMS. I would never make a recommendation to take over ambulance service without tax base, whether it be an ambulance district or a specific tax for that. Because just like all other medical care, you don't bring in what you pay out
Sure.
in that.
I'll
If you're gonna-
definitely
if you're
defer your
gonna do
knowledge
that.
on that one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just some other things, and I'll probably touch on a few more things similar to what you asked in that. But just giving you an overview of things that we deal with, other equipment and replacement needs that we have. Of course, all that equipment that's on the trucks, the personal protective equipment that our personnel have to wear. We're looking at, just to outfit a firefighter, somewhere around $2,000 just for their bunker gear, helmets, gloves, boots. And then by the time you put SCBA and the other protective equipment on, it's a substantial investment. It's something that we have to have maintenance on yearly, and we have a high propensity to make sure that our firefighters are safe in everything that they do, no matter what they go out there and do. We also have high dollar expense types of replacement, like the extrication equipment for MVAs, and then the EMS equipment, things that we do for our EMS response that we do. So now that I'm saying EMS, I'll probably go ahead and just talk about that. We are the first response for emergency medical services in the city. AMR is that transport. While we have a average time below 5 minutes, or under the 6 minutes, and while our 90th percentile is a little higher, for those EMS calls, our 90th percentile is going to be a little bit better, which means we're going to get on the scene for a medical emergency a lot quicker than most of the ambulances will, or the service for transportation will. So we carry a lot of the same or very similar equipment that we would have on an ambulance to provide advanced life support, which a lot of it is technology-based, which we all know anything technology-based doesn't seem to last very long anymore in that case. Other things we have to look at that are also a part of our yearly costs and things causes for doing service. Constantly replacing furniture and appliances at these stations. These stations are homes that our firefighters live a third of their life in. We've got to give them some basic needs and necessities at these stations. So we constantly have furniture and appliance repair and replacement, HVAC, plumbing and electrical, things like breathing air compressors, which is not your typical compressor. It has to meet a certain standard, has to be tested quarterly to make sure that breathing air meets a very high standard. Our public warning systems, we put a high amount of money on a monthly service on those systems. We have somewhere close to 40 outdoor warning sirens, and now we've also included in adding in the mass notification system with the cellular app. So we have that as well to maintain. And then, of course, the technology that we have to deal with, our radios, the CAD, and our fire records. CAD and fire records, we split that cost on a yearly basis with the police department. But that's an ongoing technology need that every year we constantly have to either make upgrades or make changes to our system to make sure that it's working appropriately. And then, of course, radios, as you've seen probably over the last few years, we too, just like the police department, have had to rotate out older series of radios because they're no longer going to be accepted by Motorola to be worked on. So we face those same challenges, and we'll probably see that again with another 5 to 6 years, that Motorola or whoever is the dealer for what we use in the metro area is probably going to say it's time for a new model. So we'll have to deal with that again. So the other need we have, of course, is personnel. We have a need to address our personnel right now with some of our daily staffing shortages. When we look at the minimum staffing for each of our apparatus, and then we look at what the maximum staffing for that apparatus is, we're under that maximum. Well, why do you got to have the maximum? Because if you don't have the maximum, when your personnel take scheduled leave, unscheduled leave, medical leave, any of those things, then it would automatically put you into overtime if you didn't have an excess number. We are regulated under FLSA a little bit different than the normal 40-hour-a-week person or job. So it does look a little bit different in how that works and how our minimum staffing and our overtime gets paid out. But it's just what we're running today. We run short, which causes us to have a little bit higher minimum staffing cost than I'm happy with, but that's discussion for later at some point. We're probably going to have to look at addressing maybe new companies or new needs. So again, if we look at what the future is, if it's EMS, we may find that not only do we need to maintain some of that fire protection, because the fire protection is important because of insurance in ratings in the city. Whether you're ISO or you're not, every insurance company looks at risk. And if we decide to make our risk higher in fire protection, that's everybody's insurance in the city. So we'll go up. Doesn't matter what insurance company they have. So we have to maintain that, but then we have to meet those new needs and goals that we might determine. We have to address some supervisory needs. Obviously, if we increase our company levels, we have to have that supervision that goes with them. At one time, we had 2 chiefs that served on shift for those 14 companies. We're down to 1. That was a reduction that was made back in the early 90s. And that increases their span of control. In other words, one person's over those 40 to 52 people that are on shift in not only the daily operations, but on emergency scenes. And then we have to look at what our expanded scope of practice is going to be in the future. Obviously, EMS is going to be a component of that. Are we going to have to start looking, or should we start looking right now at community paramedicine? Right now, EMS, the state of EMS is in kind of a mess, because when we interpret emergency in emergency services, the emergency is interpreted by the person that says they have the emergency, not what we think it is. So we have to make that response until we get there. Then we can make that determination. One model that's been looked at in the future is community paramedicine, sending or having kind of a subdivision of your EMS response to go to some of the lower priority calls, to try and find somebody that calls a lot and try to find them support and need that they need to get the care that's appropriate, instead of them always continually asking for emergency response. So that's one of the things of scope that we might look at in the past. As most of you probably may know, in the fire service, there's been very few things that when the public has stepped up and said, we need somebody to do it, the fire service hasn't stepped up and said, we'll do it. So we know that there's going to be a lot of things in the scope of practice that'll probably increase over the next 10 years. So why do we have the need? Well, let's look at the funding, because that's what it boils down to, is where does the money come from? Currently, for the fire department, we're funded under the general fund for the majority of our budget. However, we do have a 1/8 of 1% sales tax that was approved all the way back in 2004 and then reapproved in 2017 or renewed. The only thing is that everything that we planned back in 2004 and 2017 has now changed in the costs and how we have to allocate that. It is a yearly plan, just like everything else. We have capital improvement plans. We have to look at what our needs and put some things off to go with things that are now costing us more. But it's just not enough. We have to do more. And I don't even have to tell you about the general fund. You guys are plenty aware of that one. So we know where that lies. So I guess I can't give you the absolute solution, but the one thing that is a possibility out there is in 2017, the legislature did change the fire service sales tax that we currently use, where we were limited in the past to a smaller amount, 1/4 of 1%. That now has been increased up to a 1/2 of 1% of all sales made for fire protection districts or municipalities in which they're subject to taxation. So it does provide us, there is a motive or a means to try to look to the future of the fire service, the fire department, and possibly look at what we really need in the fire department and move forward. This is one thing that you can have. I could always ask for more general fund money, but I know what Zach's going to tell me on that one. So I brought this one to you just to let you know that we do have needs. We have to keep looking into the future. While I'd love to have all of the money right now, just like everyone else, I understand that we have to do what we have to do, and we're going to continue to do the service that we always provided to the patrons. We just like to do it a lot better.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Comments or questions from the council? Yes, Councilman Huff.
Yes, Chief. On your truck replacement, do you determine your pumpers and your aerial trucks and stuff? On replacement, are you doing it by years or by maintenance costs? Or how you
Okay, so we
determining
look
that?
at the years, the mileage, and the cost per mile. So what that truck is costing us per mile, which includes fuel costs and everything. Typically, a pumper, when you look at a truck, or when you look at a pumper that's going over about $2 per mile, then it's time to start looking at the replacement. It
Sure.
means its maintenance has creeped up. You know, the optimal amount in there for pumpers is somewhere around $1.25 to $1.50 per hour or per mile.
So we probably
Total
want to be
cost.
looking at something more on the idea of maybe an 8-year rotation and replacement of these instead of,
We're doing it as close to that as we can. I mean, our newest pumpers that we've got 2 ordered right now, they're going to be replacing some 2013s and 14s.
another
So-
thing, you said $2,000 to outfit each employee. How often do you replace that? I mean, Sobart's been wearing his helmet for 30 years, I think.
Well, he's got a new
Not
one now.
anymore.
So, yeah, we had to buy him a new one now, but, no, so gear usually lasts 10 years. In a normal situation, the NFPA recommends replacement every 10 years. We provide 2 sets of gear for our personnel so that at no time they have to wear contaminated gear. So if they did go into a fire, as soon as they get back to the station, they can change into uncontaminated gear and clean their current gear or their gear that they're using. That's just part of our cancer initiative that we've had and try to keep our employees safe. Now, I say, so that would be every 5 years you're replacing a set. For some companies, that we hold true to that. For some of our busier companies on the west side, we're lucky to get 2 years out of a set of gear for some of them because they do have more of the fires.
I only had one other question. I've always heard, you was down at Station 11 at the 39th corridor, I always heard that we needed something around 40 and River. Would that be the one that would handle that
That
one?
is another location that we have some difficulty in time period. So basically 3 places that we have our time elements. One is 291 and 40 highway area. One is the River and 40 highway, or that little finger that we have that kind of goes down into Raytown. And then the farthest northwest portions of our District 3, or the farthest northwest corner up in Fairmont, in those areas. We have some difficult times getting up into some of those areas. Just because the streets are so, if you've ever,
Sure.
driving down through there, it's not an easy way to get anywhere in that area of the city.
Okay, well, thank you, appreciate it.
Yep.
Other comments or questions?
Chief,
Yes, sir.
how much money would this raise and how far would we get on some of these projects you've talked about? Do you have any idea?
Well, and I would give you only my opinion for this. So currently, our 1/4 cent sales tax raises approximately 2 to 2.1 million a year.
8.
Or eighth, excuse me. So if we looked at using 1/8 of it to handle capital projects, and then 1/8 of it to handle the station part of it, to make sure we have constant renewal of the stations, then we could use 1/4 of it to handle any additional personnel needs that we would have.
Would you consider, or have you considered, or is it smart to consider, especially if some of the stations are gonna be replaced, is it possible to relocate them so that you cut off some of these spots better? Have you-
Yeah,
Is
I
that a
think it
thing or
would be
not?
prudent for us to do a deployment study if we
Okay.
do this, which, we would have a professional company that can come in and analyze our data based on national standards and look at our actual data and locations and look at trends in EMS across the nation, across Missouri, and they can tell you where those locations are the best to put stations for the future.
Gotcha. Very good.
Chief,
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
you talked about max staffing. Just going through the budget and looking at what we've spent in overtime, and I'm wondering if it would be more economical. I just posed the question, just based on dollars and cents. Would it be your recommendation to maybe add some firefighters rather than be paying some pretty big, and I don't understand how because you guys, like you said, your pay is different, but
Yeah.
we're paying a lot in terms of overtime. And I'm wondering if adding 3, 4 firefighters, if that's something that is more cost efficient for us?
As I'm sure the city manager will tell you, as well as the two assistant city managers, I always ask for more people.
Well,
Uh,
and,
Um,
safety's our big
There-
concern.
Every year, it's something different that causes those overtime, it seems like. I mean, it's all dependent upon how quickly we get replacement of staff once they're gone. It's dependent upon maybe how many people are on work comp, FMLA,
Sure.
things of that nature all at one time. COVID last year, of course, hit us hard for our budget this year. But historically, with the way things have been, our overtime has always been that. But again, been in those areas on a yearly basis. But again, we've been operating the same way for 20 years with no changes.
Well, it's okay to change.
Yeah.
It really is. Question to you would be, we learned in the last meeting, the number of PD that will be retiring out in the next 5 years. What's your number for fire department?
We're looking at probably around 15%. We've already kind of been through that change.
Okay.
I mean, we have a good chunk probably in the next 10 years or the next 5 years. But we're actually, if I'm not mistaken, about 60% of our people are less than 15 years in the service.
Yeah.
So we have been through that evolution, I guess you would say. Doesn't mean that it won't change.
Right.
I mean, we could have the same contributing factors to causing retirements
Sure.
that PD has gone through.
Yeah.
At any time.
A lot of risk involved in what you do, so having I would consider a deep pool, something that, in terms of staffing would be a wise thing for us to
Right.
consider. Maybe not this year, but I mean, if these are things that are kind of on your wish list, I think we should talk about it. When it comes to safety, I don't want to see us get into a lurch 2, 3, 4 years down the road where we're scrambling for people. And so but looking at how much we pay in overtime, and I'm kind of curious, Mr. City Manager, what traditionally over the last 5 years we've spent in overtime with the fire department. Do we have those numbers? Can you get those numbers to us?
Yeah, I can get those numbers to you. And as I mentioned in my presentation, we've been working the last few years, and I think finally last year we're able to fully fund the minimum staffing costs. So we're accurately budgeting for those, but we'll get those costs so that you have those.
I'm just curious to see what our historic numbers are, and
Yeah.
then if there's something we can do to add personnel, because I don't want the chief to be facing the same thing that our police chief's facing down the road. We need to be proactive and get people he wants in here, get them trained, and grow them in our department. If we can financially make it work.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Okay. I jotted down a lot of notes, Chief. Since I've been on the council, we've had 3 city managers and 3 fire chiefs, and I still don't know the answer to that question. That's always the thing that's so difficult to get to, is where is that tipping point where you add staff or pay overtime? So that has been, I'm glad that you're asking those questions, Councilman, and that's been a very hard number to pinpoint.
We have worked over on it the last couple of years, really to really dive into why we get to where we're at. And we've found some of those things and how we keep the staffing up.
Yeah.
You know, when we have openings from retirements, the sooner that we bring more people on, the less overtime we incur from doing that. So, you know, we've definitely looked into that.
You mentioned at the very onset the Quint that was, how, it just kind of jogged my memory. How long have we had that truck?
The Quint itself is a 2010 or 11.
13?
That's at Station 4.
Yeah,
But
okay.
we have an aerial, a truck at Station 2, which is, the Quint was 2012 or 14, something like that.
Yeah, that's
The
what I-
truck that we have at Station 2 is currently a 2006, and that's the one that we've already approved a purchase order for at least a year ago, but
Yeah.
it takes that long
Right.
for an aerial to be built.
Right, so
And COVID slowed it down even
so
more.
that's to replace
Truck 2.
truck 2,
Yeah.
okay.
But what that'll allow us to do, the one that we'll purchase this year, if the budget's approved, will replace Quint 4,
Okay,
and it will give us a newer truck in reserve. Because it doesn't do us any good to have an older, rundown,
right. And we
piece
bought
of
that one
POS
used, if I
that-
remember correctly.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. One of the, and just to clarify, the 1/8 of a cent, we typically figure that brings in about $2 million per 1/8 of a cent in
Right.
sales tax revenue. I mean, we know that's changing. I mean, that's, it's never quite performs the way we hope, but I had forgotten, so thank you for reminding us, that in 2004, because our station facilities had been so neglected, that we dedicated that first 1/8 of a cent strictly to stations, and then we caught up with equipment and other capital needs later, but we prioritized those stations. And I had forgotten that we did that. So that kind of explains why we, every year, can't just keep building stations like we did,
Right.
which people remember in those early years after that initial tax was approved. The use tax, I know wasn't part of your presentation, but that is projected to start overflowing into all of the special taxes as early as this year. We expect that, so that's not gonna be a tremendous amount of money. I think for the fire service, it's maybe less than $100,000, if I remember correctly, after I memorized the budget. But, you know, that is something else that will, I think, continue to grow. I mean, obviously, it's limited to the confines of that fire tax that was approved by the voters. If I have my information correct, the legislation that was supported, I would be remiss in saying, by Senator John Rizzo is the person who sponsored this legislation on behalf of the fire service. Not only does it increase the capacity of that tax, but it also expands the purpose of the tax. Is that correct?
that's correct. It
Okay.
expands it to all fire department operations.
So previously, it was limited to capital. Now it could be used for personnel and other expenses outside of capital needs. So I think that's important for people to know as well. The only thing I didn't hear a lot about, and I know it's something that our fire service has talked about a lot over the years, is training. Additional use of funding for training. I know our training facility, you know, was somewhat underbuilt at the time and could be expanded or potentially, you know, co-located with a new fire station. But outside of facilities, what do you foresee in terms of need for additional training?
Right now, that's still a very high emphasis with me in the current sales tax. I have a training background, so as I prioritize, that's one thing that I prioritize in our current sales tax. However, as needs of equipment and apparatus start to grow, sometimes that is our only go-to place. So hopefully this will kind of offset some of that so we can remain, dedicated to putting that money into our training.
Okay, very good. That was all I had. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, Health Department update.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, with the recognition from the state of Missouri for the City of Independence as a local public health agency, our staff has been busy resuming those activities after we reorganized those duties back in 2018. So tonight, Acting Assistant Director of Health Diane Egger is here to give the council an update on those activities.
Very good.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Diane Egger, and I am the Acting Assistant Director for the Health Department. I'm pleased to offer you this evening this brief presentation on the current status of the Health Department. As City Manager stated, on December 7th of 2020, we were recognized by the state. We got notice that we were recognized by the state, and the city began the process of determining what was needed to get the health department running up again, and what we would need as the health department. So while the acting health director, Christina Heinen, continued the arduous work of the testing sites and the vaccination sites and the vaccination clinics, Mike Jackson of the Municipal Services Department stepped in and helped to determine where the department might be housed, where it could be housed. We set up some interviews. At that time, he set up some interviews and then began the initial budget planning. At the end of March, I was brought on as the acting assistant health director. And I would say that we are hitting the ground running as a health department. In such a short time, I think we've done a lot of work. Here we are at City Hall. We are located right over to the left of the council chambers. We have some temporary signage that we have put up thanks to Public Works. They made us some temporary signage. We also, as you could see on the slides, a lab. We have soft serve testing that the health department has always done, that the state requires, and that we actually perform. Many jurisdictions in the state do not perform their own soft serve testing. We are one of the only jurisdictions that do that. So we were able to get the lab moved down. And if I could just get a shout out, I don't know if that's appropriate, to Chris Johnson, the IT team, fabulous to help us move. And also Mike Schott and his team, just super, super fabulous. It's been really a great experience after all my years of city to see everybody come together and really help us, and I just want to thank them. So the steps that we have taken in this amount of time, we have moved the environmental staff, which was housed in community development. We've moved them down, and I don't know if any of you have seen the space, the old city clerk space over here, but that's where we're at. And it was full of stuff and full of storage items, so we were able to clean that out. We were able to set up all the cubicles, get the computers running, so our entire environmental staff is operating right over here in this space. We have hired an administrative admin for the unit. She started last month in April. We have hired an epidemiologist. She starts July 5th. And she starts July 5th because she has to move. She's graduating from Yale University. So she's starting July 5th, and it'll take her a little bit to get here, but she's starting July 5th. A public health specialist, we have, it says here, May 24th, which is today. So I wrote this earlier. But he started today. Today was his first day, so we're excited to have him on board. So the office spaces are set up. We're getting employees in. And I'm proud to say that the reestablishing of the health department is going smooth. We're right over here. The health department is receiving phone calls, processing permits, doing food handler cards, performing inspections, everything that the environmental portion of the health department is responsible for doing, we are doing right down here in our new space. So that's what we have done in that short amount of time, and what's to come. Technology Services is working on a new program for our inspectors. It's a streamlined program. It's a more updated program. We're working on a program that was built in, the 90s, I believe, 80s or 90s. And so they're working on that. Hopefully by spring, we will have that. We are bringing in together the communicable disease staff. So there's kind of two branches to our health department. One is the environmental portion, which are the inspectors. The other would be the communicable disease staff, where you have chronic disease individuals. You have also public health nurses, a public health specialist, and then they all work together to form the health department. So the ultimate goal will be the integration of the environmental staff and those communicable disease staff members to make a cohesive health department to literally promote and protect the public health, which is the main objective of a health department. And that is my brief presentation, and I will be open to answer questions. If I have the answer, I will be pleased to.
Thanks, Diane. I assume you're offering tours of your new facility?
Yes, if you would like a tour of our new posh digs, we
Yeah.
would be glad to offer that.
Well, it's amazing where we can find space in this building when we have to. So it looks great. You've done a tremendous amount of work to, fulfill what the council envisioned when we pursued the reestablishment of our health department. We definitely have a long way to go and some funding that we need to secure. It's off to a tremendous start. So thank you. Comments or questions? Yes.
Yes, I was wondering, Mr. City Manager, don't we have any room out there at the utility center for this?
We haven't done any kind of like exploration on those facilities yet. Primarily right now, Councilmember, we wanted to get this up and running, just to get a place for them to be. They were a new team without a home. I don't think that we envision this being their permanent long-term home at all, particularly as they grow. I think very quickly they will come to outgrow this space. But we did want to find something that would give them a little, but all of those are very worthwhile operation or options that will need to be explored.
So all this is portable?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
all this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, correct.
Okay, all right.
If I could add something, IUC was considered, but any occupant there has to pay rent, and because this is a department with pretty limited funding, we figured it's best to go to the mission instead of overhead costs.
Great. Yeah, makes a difference, for sure. Yes, Councilman?
Thank you. Ms. Ayer, again, I'll echo what the mayor said. Thank you so much for the work that you've done. I know how much work Doug Short and Christina Heinen did on putting the COVID shots together. I got my shot through the city and was very, very thankful for that. First question is, are those still going? Is that an ongoing availability?
The vaccinations?
Vaccinations?
Yes,
Do we have
Christina
shots
is.
available? And
Absolutely, sure.
Hi, Christina Heinen, Interim Health Director for the City of Independence. Yes, we are still doing vaccination sites. We actually are doing them at the mall on Wednesday and Thursday this week. We are doing school vaccinations tomorrow, so all of the staff will be rotating around to the different middle schools for the Independence School District tomorrow. And on Friday, we're actually doing an event with the state up near Worlds of Fun to vaccinate up there at Harvest Church. You can sign up via Vaccine Navigator, but yes, we are continuing to do vaccinations. Anyone and everyone who wants a vaccine, if you're 12 and over, we will vaccinate you.
And thank you so much. And can folks find that on our website?
Yes, indep.us/vaccines. I'm looking back, yep. Make sure I said it right. It has all of our calendar up there, all of the links to sign up, get registered, and we accept walk-ins.
That's fantastic. Okay, thank you so much for that. Second question, and the one that's more fun for me kinda, is are we looking at a health department that is sort of new and improved from the health department of the past? Is it primarily the same function? Has COVID affected what public health departments look like going forward?
You know, the health department, in 2017, 2018, I mean, we're gonna have probably different functions. It is gonna be more, chronic disease-based and monitoring-based. I'm guessing, Christine and I will work together with that, but, I'm assuming that's what we're going to do. It's not gonna look identical to the health department of the past. There were other programs that, we'll just have to weed out and only cherry pick the ones that are important to the community through surveys, through city manager's office, through the involvement of, them discussions with you, then we'll figure out what the health department specific programs might be important to the community and then build those in. But right now, it's epidemiology, chronic disease. But yeah, in the future, we'll take any direction from the city manager's office that you would like to see.
Sure appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Mayor, if I may, thank you for the presentation. Thanks for all the hard work you've done to put this thing together, and follow Councilman Hobart's comments about the future of the health department, looking at different, we look at diseases, but mental illness is also a big portion of where we're going, and using co-responders and developing programs like that to really get out and help with our mental illness problems. So as we're moving ahead, thinking ahead, having that on the burner somewhere of how can we integrate that. I mispronounced that word, but you know what I mean.
Yes,
How we
absolutely.
try to
Yes.
move that in and mesh that together as we get the building blocks set, that we can build upon that.
Absolutely.
Yep, very good. Okay, I mean, we do, still have Jackson County Health Department operating in our community and across the county, as well as many private healthcare systems and Truman Medical Center, which has obviously been a tremendous partner for us as well. So, I'm very pleased of where we're going, and we do have to fulfill certain requirements in order to retain our LPHA status. So I think that's of the utmost importance, and fill in where our community needs us and where those gaps might be found. So thank you so much for all of your work. It's been tremendous. Okay. All right.
Thank
I
you.
think- Anything else, Christina? Okay. Next is an item that I had requested for this evening, which is one that's been one of much discussion, is the fuel cost adjustment review. This is to remind the citizens a cost that we incurred due to the extreme February weather that had a tremendous impact on the cost for us to provide power to our community. So in listening to the discussion the last few weeks and doing, quite a bit of investigation that this council has been heavily engaged in, I wanted to suggest that we give some longer-term assurance to our community and then leave some uncertainty about what they can expect in terms of future expense added to their utility bill that they receive from the city. And I know Mr. Nail's been very, very helpful in explaining to us that we're going to kind of, continue to monitor this on an ongoing basis and adjust as necessary to spread this cost over a period of time and at a rate that our community can absorb. There's no sense in sending somebody a bill that they cannot pay. And we are certainly working our way back out of a pretty substantial hole that we incurred by this council's incredible compassion and desire to keep people housed during this pandemic primarily, keep their heat on, keep their air conditioning on, keep their water on. So I thought I would bring this forward at the study session rather than bringing it forward on a council agenda and ask for this to be referred to the Public Utilities Advisory Board for their consideration. I'm proposing a 36-month span to recover this cost, but wanted the council's, but I'm certainly open to other possibilities, and I just wanted some feedback from the council about referring this to the PUAB for them to bring us back a recommendation. So are there any thoughts, comments, or questions?
No,
Yes.
I think that's a great idea.
Okay, so if there's no objection, Mr. City Manager, if you could bring this forward to the PUAB for them to bring back the council a recommendation.
We will.
Madam Mayor?
Yes,
I'd like to also, if we could, just look at the fuel costs from January to December of 2020. I know we've passed on fuel cost adjustments over the last 12 months, some between 10 and 30%, in a time where, and what got me thinking about this is something you said, Mayor, was, gosh, even if it goes down.
yeah.
But never seen that. And
Well,
it's,
it
and
was.
and it's extraordinary because we've had fuel costs, whether it be fuel or natural gas, have been some of the historic lows. And I'd like to know why those fuel costs were so low that we were still paying so much more. So I'd like to see an audit from IPL for that January to December that resulted in additional charges.
Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Okay. The next item, which is a staff report on proposed executive session language. This was also something that I had requested. I don't know, Mr. City Manager, if you'd like to set this up, or if you just want me, okay.
Yeah, but-
I had the opportunity a few weeks ago to attend a training that was hosted by Lauber Law, which is a law firm based out of Blue Springs that specialize only in municipal law. They do a lot of work with us at the city and IPL. And it was very, very helpful session, but one of the takeaways that I thought was important to bring forward to this council is some changes that are recommended on how we conduct executive session. It is highly recommended that we notice executive sessions on every council agenda. And when I was listening to this part of the presentation at the seminar, it occurred to me that some of the other public bodies that I serve on boards for do this, that every agenda they notice a public session at least on issues of personnel and legal action. And the reason for this is that if something were to happen on a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, that did not reach the level to require an emergency session, but yet was something that was critical that the council address, we would not be able to have an executive session on a Monday because it would not be properly noticed. So this is a best practice that has been put forward. As I said, I serve on a Little Blue Valley Sewer District. This is a routine thing that they notice on every agenda executive session, and then if you don't have it, you don't have it. It does not mean that we still don't have to call the executive session for a specific purpose, but it would allow us to have it, and if it was necessary. So I would like for us to consider making that change to our future agendas, to notice the executive session in the event that under extraordinary circumstances we may have to have it on matters of personnel and legal action. And if there were other items that the council wanted to routinely add to that, then we could. So that was one thing. The other is it was, I hate to say we haven't been doing executive sessions correctly. But you do sometimes fall into routines, and I inherited the way we did it from the prior mayor and, have just continued to do that. But it's very important for us to remember that those are open meetings. We call an open meeting and then we adjourn into a closed meeting. And we need to make those meetings accessible to the public, and the council should adjourn to a different location. We should not ask the public to move to a different location. So we've had our executive sessions in conference room A for many, many, many years. But I'm concerned that that may not be proper. It's not accessible to the public. They can come up the stairs and come up the elevator, but it's not handicap accessible to the public. So I would like to, and then if the public does come, when we when we go into the closed session, we ask them to leave, which is technically improper. So I would like to recommend that we just make a slight change moving forward, that we convene the meeting here in the council chambers so the public can be here for the open meeting, and then the council can go into a closed session either in conference room A or conference room D, if that's still available. I know some of it's been taken over by the health department. But, again, in this, in some of the training that I've taken place in, I think that would be more appropriate for us moving forward to call our meeting to order, open meeting to order here when we go in closed session. The council can adjourn to a separate room with the appropriate staff, and the public can remain here. So I'm just asking for any comments, questions, feedback on those two items, and if there's no objection, then we'll go ahead and move those forward, starting with the next council meeting. Okay. Then that was all I had. Mr. City Manager, anything else this evening?
Nothing else tonight, Mayor.
Any other items that any council member wants to bring forward? Okay, we are adjourned.